Are we ready to go? Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. My name is Adriana Valenzuela. I am the Youth Leadership and Education Lead at the Global Center on Adaptation. And I am delighted to welcome all of you to the Asian Youth Adaptation Forum. Today, we are bringing together young leaders, international experts, decision makers to think together what is needed to move the adaptation agenda forward, but the most important, how the global goal on adaptation that was set up by governments in 2015 under the Paris Agreement can really get the inputs of young people from all over the world. Today, we have a very, very exciting agenda. I want to welcome the participants that are joining us today from all over the world, but especially participants from Asia, and also to all our speakers. We put together this event, and we will have an agenda that will be divided in 3 parts. We will have a keynote conversation with one of the global leaders on the adaptation agenda, Professor Salem Hook. And we will discuss in a bit about adaptation and the global goal on adaptation. After that, we are going to have an intergenerational dialogue that brings together young people and also decision makers. And the second part will be showcasing youth-led solutions. We have young people from China, Bangladesh, Indonesia, Nepal, and other countries presenting their experience. And the final part will be working groups when we want to hear from you. What do you think a climate resilient Asia could be? And what are these 5 transformational actions that can enable this transformation? Then at the end, we will have a closing remarks by the COP27 presidency that this year is hosted by Egypt. Then without any other introduction, I want to invite our keynote speaker, Professor Salem Hook. He is the director of the International Center for Climate Change and Development. He is one of the global leaders leading really the adaptation agenda. He joined the climate change conference from the first conference. And this year we are going to meet at the COP27 that will be in Egypt. And Professor Salem Hook had been in the 26 conferences. He is also one of the lead authors of the IPCC report. And he's leading multiple initiatives. He's also one of the experts of the Climate Vulnerable Forum. He's one of the negotiators of the least developed countries. And he has also inspired many generations and mobilized concrete solutions, not only in Bangladesh, but in the less developed countries, but as well in many countries. He's also very active with the consortium of least developed universities. Then, Salem, thank you very much for accepting this invitation. It is an honor and a privilege having you here today. And you are one of these global leaders. I would like that you will share with us a bit about why adaptation is crucial to address climate change.
Thank you very much, Adriana. It's a pleasure to be here with you in this event. I think, 20 years ago when I started working on adaptation, I used to have to explain what is adaptation and why is it important. I don't have to do that anymore. People now know. You look out your window and you'll see climate change happening and that we are not adapted to it. And so the reason for looking at adaptation and considering adaptation no longer needs explanation. We now have to think about how do we do it? How do we do it more effectively? Because we're not doing it well enough. No country is, not even the richest countries are adapted to the impacts of climate change. They might think they are, but they're not. And so we have to redouble our efforts and our knowledge on how to adapt and what to do to adapt to the impacts of climate change. And it's a learning by doing process. It's not theory to practice, it's practice to theory. So everybody has to do something and learn by doing. And every place is different. So every location is very location specific in terms of what to be done. But then we can also learn from each other in the how we did things to tackle climate change. So just to give you an example, the Netherlands and Bangladesh are very often cited as two very similarly located low-lying delta countries, but the countries are very different in their ability to cope. Netherlands can build big dikes and protect the whole country. We can't in Bangladesh. So, even if the problem is similar, the solutions are not going to be the same everywhere. But we must learn from each other. That, I think, is the key lesson.
Excellent. And in 2015, governments got together and they agreed the Paris Agreement, that is this universal framework for climate change. And also under the Paris Agreement, one of the key elements is that adaptation was recognized equally important as mitigation. But under the Paris Agreement, parties agreed on the global goal on adaptation. And now with these conversations that we have with young people, we're asking them, what is the global goal on adaptation? And what are the main needs of the vulnerable countries?
Absolutely, Adriana. So what happened in Paris, which was a very important and path-breaking event, the 21st Conference of Parties in 2015, where we had the Paris Agreement. So the big headline was the mitigation goal, which is well below 2 degrees and if possible 1.5 degrees. And ever since then, we have understood the 1.5 degrees as the global goal for mitigation. At the same time, vulnerable countries argued for also having a global goal on adaptation. In Article 7, it was agreed to have a global goal on adaptation. But as I just said, adaptation is very location specific. So having a global goal like mitigation, there's no equivalent 1.5 degree adaptation. It's complicated. And so we decided we would take some time to figure out what should be the global goal. Should there be one goal? Should there be several goals? We are now going to discuss that. The good news is in COP26 in Glasgow, we have agreed a work program to develop the Glasgow Sharm el-Sheikh pathway for developing the global goal on adaptation. This will be discussed in COP27 and then hopefully finalized by COP28. And this is a very good time for young people to give their inputs into that global goal. We all need to be thinking about it. We may end up with one goal. I doubt that. I think we'll have several goals. But whatever goal we adopt in the end, the most important element that I would ask everybody to start thinking about is how do we measure progress on that goal? And particularly young people making some contribution to measuring progress. Because I feel, in my view, I very strongly feel that young people's development and adaptation should be one of the goals. And we should be measuring young people's involvement in adaptation as a metric for determining if we are going towards that goal or not. That's my suggestion. And I hope our young people today can come up with even better suggestions.
Fantastic. Then one of the recommendations, how to measure young people engagement and participation in the adaptation processes. Very, very good. And Salem, governments are going to meet next week in Bonn. What do you expect that will happen there in Bonn regarding the global goal on adaptation?
Well, there's going to be discussions in Bonn. I will be there. I hope to be there in the formal negotiation process where governments are the formal negotiators. But many governments nowadays are quite keen to listen to the youth. I know my country, Bangladesh, our government has consultations with the youth and takes their views into account. Some governments even have youth delegates. That's a very good thing. I recommend all governments should have youth delegates. And there are youth constituencies that are outside the governments. The Yango constituency in particular has been working with the UNFCCC for a long time, and they have a very good network. So there are various avenues through which youth can have their views represented and make sure that they are at least heard and hopefully taken into account in the decision making. And then, as I said, track that decision making. Don't let it go at just simply you went and you said something. You have to track whether that something was heard, something was done. If not, then keep pushing it. If it was, then how do you implement it? Hold the decision makers and the implementers to account afterwards, because this is not just a one-off. This is about the future. And that's where the youth have a very big role to play.
Okay. And my final question will be how young people can get involved. And we have different levels of governance. We have the local level, the national level, and the international level. But from your experience, how they can engage in the local and national level, but as well at the international level?
Well, let me start at the local level, which is where I work. You know, I have been working for 20 years at the local level in the least developed countries, the most vulnerable developing countries. And we have a network of local adapters. As you know, I'm an advisor, a senior advisor to the GCA on locally led adaptation. It's one of the big initiatives of the GCA, which I'm very happy to be part of and very proud to be part of. And under that locally led adaptation, this Youth Adaptation Network is something that you have been pioneering, and we are now discussing in our region in Asia, which is by far the biggest region, both in terms of emissions and as well as in terms of impact. So it's a very, very important region where local youth need to be involved. I think that is absolutely essential. We hope this meeting will be a good initiator, but we can then follow up at the country level for local youths to get involved in actions on the ground. Actions on the ground are by far more important than getting messages into the COP. I'm not saying COP messaging is not important, but doing things on the ground is much, much more important and can involve many, many more youth. Not everybody can go to the COP, but everybody can do something where they live. And that's what I hope we can support and engender and hear from them. They're doing it already. So I'm not preaching anything that's new. It's already happening, but we need to give them the platform to learn from them and to give them an opportunity to tell us what they're doing.
Fantastic. Then everyone needs to take action to be able to adapt to the impacts of climate change. Then now we will have the possibility, if you have any question, we will have the possibility to address these questions to Professor Salem. And I just will check. Yes, please feel free to write down in the chat. And also, I received already one question, and it is regarding to the needs of the vulnerable countries. Then, what are these needs? How the vulnerable countries can advance implementing adaptation actions?
That's an excellent question. So I will start at the very local level, where people are already suffering the impacts of climate change, suffering losses and damages because of climate change, and having to adapt. I used to refer to the local communities as the most vulnerable communities. I don't say that anymore because they're already adapting to the impacts of climate change. I now call them the local adapters. They are doing it. They are, as we speak, they may not know the word adaptation, they may not know the word climate change, but they are doing adaptation. So we need to work with them, we need to help them, we need to see how we as outsiders can support them to do the work. And that we then has to be those of us who are, academics like me, negotiators, national government decision makers at local government or national government, or global decision makers. Our responsibility, in my view, is to help the people at the front lines who are suffering the impacts and are adapting now. Our obligation is to find them and help them. And young people in particular can be that bridge to the actual people on the ground and connecting it to national decision makers and global decision makers.
it's an invitation for all of you, to connect with your local and national governments, but also with the different stakeholders. I can see there is another question more, and with this question, we will move to the next section. That is, how could more youth youth, I guess, from the global south participate more in the international climate arena? And the final one is the views about the national adaptation plans. As many countries have still not come up with these plans, how youth could be involved in the NAPs and how they could lead locally led community adaptation plans.
Excellent. So on the global youth participation, it is true that youth has become a major global player all over the world on climate change. We are seeing that. Just to cite one example, we have every Friday, the school students, the Fridays for Futures, are demonstrating and acting all over the world, inspired by the still teenagers, Greta Thunberg from Sweden. She's about to graduate out of teenager status. But that is a very good sign. And there are many others. However, what I would say is that there are two things that are lagging. The first is that it's very northern. There's still not enough Southern participation in these global movements. We need to increase that. And this webinar aimed at the Asia Pacific zone is a way forward. And secondly, the issue of adaptation does not get as much airtime as mitigation. It's always on mitigation, reducing emissions. I'm not saying that's not important, but adaptation also needs to be taken into account. So the global movement needs to be more accommodating of the South and more accommodating of adaptation than it has been. There's an imbalance there. With regards to the NAPs, my advice to every youth in every country that is doing a national adaptation plan, if the plan mentions youth, if the plan mentions locally led adaptation, then that's your entry point. You must go to the planners and the implementers and tell them that you want to help them implement that plan. If the plan doesn't mention youth or it doesn't mention locally led adaptation, then go to the implementers anyway and tell them that you want to help them implement the plan. Youth have to be a solution. You don't need to criticize the government. It's not your role to just simply criticize. Your role is to implement the actions that have been agreed to do. There are many actions that have already been agreed. They're not being implemented well, so help them implement them well. Make yourselves constructive partners with your national and local governments to implement what they have already agreed to do. Everybody's agreed to do it. They may not be doing it, but they have agreed. So this is not something you have to convince them. You just have to help them do it.
Thank you very, very much. It has been a very interesting conversation. And the most important is this key message. Everyone needs to play a role to adapt to the impacts of climate change. And we need this intergenerational dialogue. We need this engagement of young people in decision-making processes at all levels. And the transformation starts at the local level because adaptation is locally led action driven. Then thank you very much to Professor Salem Hook. It's an honor to be in this event with you, and also the recommendations that we will have not only from the Asian Youth Forum, but from all the forums and the Youth Summit, we will share with you, and we are sure that you, as one of the negotiators, also can transmit these recommendations of young people. Thank you very much, and we will continue with our agenda. Thank you very much. Then now I want to invite our two young members of the Youth Advisory Panel. The Global Center on Adaptation established the Youth Leadership Program because we believe that youth can play a fundamental role leading adaptation solutions and mobilizing also different responses. In 2021, the CEO of the Global Center on Adaptation, Professor Patrick Percoye, established the Youth Advisory Panel. 12 young leaders from different countries in the world provide strategic advice. And I am delighted to welcome two members. We have Kathy Lee, she is from China, and then we have also Irfan Ulan from Pakistan. Irfan, Kathy, thank you for your leadership and for helping us to put this event together. It's fantastic to see you. And maybe just very briefly, you introduce yourself on your role. And after that, we will go and move forward with the panel on the role of youth in the global goal on adaptation. Kathy, over to you.
Sure. Thank you, Adriana and Salim, and welcome again, everyone, to join us, whether you're joining through Zoom or through the live stream. And to briefly introduce myself, I'm Kathy, a member of the Youth Advisory Panel, and I mainly follow UNFCCC processes on finance, technology, and of course, adaptation, and by profession, a sustainable finance consultant. And I'll pass the floor to Irfan.
Yeah, thank you so much, Katie, and thank you so much, Adriana, for the introduction. So yeah, my name is Irfanullah. I work also as a panel member of Youth Advisory Panel for GCA CEO Patrick. And our main goal is to bring youth voices from Global South, and especially in this context, the youth voices from Asia to the climate adaptation agenda, which we think somehow missing, especially if we talk about Global South and youth from Asia. So our main aim is to bring youth voices, and also thank to GCA to be this trendsetter for other organizations that how youth could be meaningfully engaged in climate adaptation agenda. So by profession, I am a disaster risk reduction and humanitarian practitioner, and I usually work on researches on climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction. Yeah, thanks, and over to you, Adriana.
Fantastic. And now we are going to move to our panel. Now we have heard from the Professor Salemul about the global goal on adaptation. But now the voice is for you about to listen what do you think, your perspective. And Irfan, I am glad that you will be moderating this session of the event. Then over to you. Please welcome all our panelists.
Yeah, thank you so much, Adriana, once again. And as early mentioned by Salimul Hoka and Adriana, that youth are agent of change, and youth really need to be on the forefront of the fight against climate change. And here, I think so the youth from Asia play an important role. So, for example, if we see the Asia continent, so our contribution to climate change, greenhouse gas emission is not that much, but I think so we are among the top on the list which are affecting from climate change. For example, the recent flooding in India, in Bangladesh, and in Pakistan somehow is a clear indication that Asia continent is vulnerable to climate impact in future. And here I think so youth have a main role to play, and they can really play a good role. And thanks to GCA to bringing the youth voices from marginalized community. So yeah, as I mentioned before, GCA is a trendsetter in youth involvement in climate in global climate agenda. And we also know that in 2013, government will review the overall process made in achieving the global goal and adaptation, and to provide recommendation to accelerate in implementation as a part of global stocktake. And I think so here it's really important to have youth voices because you can't really ignore the population of 1.8 billion youth, and they are really showing by their work, by their example, that what amazing work they are doing. So now we're having a nice panel discussion, and we're having a lineup of an amazing panelists which are doing an amazing work back in their country. And we are also having amazing panelist is a professional working for you. So yeah, in our panel panelists, we having Mariana Ohler. Mariana is a passionate development sector professional with more than 20 years of experience in engaging young people, private and public sector on child rights and youth agenda in the country across South, Southeast, and Central Asia. We also have Ms. Ketali. She's a member of GCA Youth Advisory Panel to CEO and follow UNFCCC processes with a focus on technology, finance, and adaptation. Katie also serves as a One Step Greener ambassador for COP26 and youth advisor of UNIEDO. By profession, Katie is a sustainable finance consultant at Deloitte's London office. And our last panelist is Anish Rishta. He's from Nepal, is a youth advocate belonging to Newer indigenous community of Nepal and very actively engaged in representing indigenous people in youth voices for more than 8 years. He has been active in human rights, environment, climate change, indigenous people and youth issues. He is also a CEO of Youth YFED Foundation. So yeah, thanks everyone for joining. And to kick off the discussion, we will having each question for our panel members. I will ask one question each panel member, but the other member also feel free to jump in and to share your insight. So yeah, my first question goes to Ms. Katie. So Katie, as we know, you are actively engaged in different events, and especially, for example, COP and SPs. So based on your experience, what challenges do youth face to participate in adaptation policies and action in Asia?
Great, thanks so much, Irfan. And I guess I can just briefly kickstart before we play the welcome message from Yusuf. And from my side, of course, I guess the major challenge would be lack of capacity building, whether it's knowledge or whether it's financial support to really allow youth to actively involve in adaptation policy, whether it's national or subnational, or whether it's intergovernmental processes. And of course, Yangon is involved in the work of the adaptation division of UNFCCC, but there are so many gaps and so many opportunities that we can further use involvement in the processes. And of course, as Salim mentioned, that adaptation is complicated and it's not as kind of easy for the public to understand or to attract their interest, like, for example, mitigation goal 1.5 degrees. So having a sub-goal of the global goal on adaptation on focusing on youth engagement is indeed definitely critical. And there are, of course, examples where some governments have youth consultations, youth delegations, and welcome civil society voices in various processes. But of course, it's not all of the countries have such processes, and not all countries have the attention on youth involvement. So I think it's definitely that's definitely a huge challenge in terms of attention from the national governments. And also, obviously, another challenge is on locally led adaptation that is really critical for youth, for women, for indigenous peoples to play a huge role in this process, but also that their efforts might not have been recognized and they might not have been given enough resources to work in the field and to really upskill. And just to summarize, as mentioned by some audience in the chat, that the national adaptation plans might not have considered youth enough. And I think that's obviously a challenge from the policy side, which is also super critical for implementation. So that's pretty much it from my side. And I'll pass the floor back to Irfan to play the welcome message from Yusuf.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Katie, for opening this panel discussion. And we would like to have the opening message from Patrick and also from Yusuf. So yeah, Ofi, leave to you, please.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. I'm very happy to be addressing the youth constituency on climate change and on the specific issue of adaptation and on what the global goal on adaptation should entail. Now, at the outset, allow me to apologize on behalf of all adults for the situation that we and our predecessors over the past 200 years have put the youth in this strange situation where you are the first generation to endure the impacts of climate change, but yet the last generation to be able to solve the problem. And you may recall that the science made its mark in 2018 with the IPCC report on the 1.5 by giving us a very short window of action where we have to transform the way we do our business in order to be able to retain what we consider to be a prosperous life or an acceptable life. And we are now in peril of even extinction. Now, how can you help and how can the climate process help with visioning such a desirable future where we do not have to worry about climate change perils or other ecological disasters, and on the contrary, move into an abundant, sustainable environment and mindset. Now, you know that our negotiating process has identified goals for mitigation well below 2 degrees, preferably 1.5. We have objectives for funding, the 100 billion, and there will be a new number for 2025. And we are still to articulate what kind of vision we want for adaptation and resilience. And this is really important for us to now get the input from the main stakeholders of the future, the youth. What is it that you would like to see in terms of a future mindset that would prioritize resilience, that would prioritize sustainability? It's not just a climate change thing. It's climate change and biodiversity and nature stewardship and equity across the world. How can we do that? We'd like to know how you would define the tenets of such a desirable future. Now, this also reflects what kinds of values do we want to instill in the world? What kind of learning would then make us depart from the standard educational system that prioritizes extractive economies at the expense of regenerative economies? And within the coming 2 years, we will have a work stream, the Global Goal on Adaptation, where we will have 8 different workshops where inputs from all external entities are welcome. And I look forward to the youth constituency presenting very strongly their own input, insights, aspirations, visions to help us take the right decisions internationally and nationally and subnationally to move our societies to that aspirational world that guarantees all these positive values that define what it means to be permanently sustainable, to be permanently resilient, to have moved towards that regenerative lifestyle to which we all aspire. Thank you very much.
So yeah, that was Yusuf from UNFCCC, which really emphasized the youth role and how they could be the change agent if we talk about climate agenda and building the resilience of community. So now we will move on to hear from our amazing CEO, GCA. Okay, sorry. So now I think we should move to our panel discussion. And yeah, once again, thank you so much for joining. So now my question go to Anish, which is also an amazing young leader from Global South and from Nepal. So Anish, what do you think? Why is it fundamental to empower youth in Asia to be part of adaptation solution?
Thank you very much, Irfan. So let me change the view so that thank you for giving me the opportunity to join this discussion today. It's amazing to hear from all the great speakers and the initiator organization, Global Center on Adaptation, and especially the Youth Leadership Program. I think young peoples are the flag carrier of the climate action. So climate action is the thing that the young people always bring in the table, and keep on reminding our leaders that we need a climate action because we have the urgency of the climate crisis in this planet. So this is the fundamental part of itself that we had this global crisis, global problem, and we need a global solution which is all coming together and doing the climate action. So for that, as you know, young people already making a lot of action on the ground. And the first action when we speak about the climate action is because we cannot substitute, or we cannot control the climate change in a very large scale. So it's important that we mitigate, but as well as we mitigate, but still there will be effects. So we have to adapt. So the young people, the first climate action they are doing is the adaptation. So on the ground with the agriculture, with the transformation of the livelihood. So many things the young peoples are doing. So it is the young people who bring climate action, adaptation agenda on the table, as I said. So to make it more smooth, to make it more larger, and to make it more impactful, the adaptation that which the world needs right now, because the mitigation in 100% is not possible. So for the adaptation, already young people leading, so young people need more space, more capacity building, and more support, so that they can lead and they can support this climate adaptation to grow bigger. And we have adapt for the future, as we say. We need to adapt for the future. So young people are already adapting to make their future bright, already adapting to cope the climate change, and already adapting to transform the climate action and to transform this climate agenda for a sustainable well-being and sustainable planet. So it is important for young people who not only speaks, who not only concerns, but who acts, are part of the agenda even bigger. They are in the decision in discussion. They are in, and then in the decision making process. So we need our voice, we need our representation, and we need the support, so that we can do more and we can support this planet for adaptation. So adaptation is an urgent need, as the climate change is also urgent agenda. So I call for the transformative action for climate adaptation. So I think we need to do a lot. So as not only making the youth aspect or youth voices fundamental, but also the youth concerns and youth need a fundamental in climate adaptation, such as providing urgent climate finance, providing urgent capacity, technical support, capacity building, so that young people can continue to evolve, continue to innovate, and continue to adapt.
Yeah.
So we need support, and the support needs to become with the solidarity. So we thank you and look forward to more discussion, and we have a fruitful convergence of this Asian Youth Adaptation Forum. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anish, especially for highlighting the resources to the local youth, are those who are doing an amazing job back in their community, back in their countries, and sometimes they don't have enough resources, but despite lack of resources, they are doing an amazing work. So yeah, my next question goes to Marianne about her experience with young people around the globe. So Marianne, what are youth priority in Asia for global goal on adaptation based on your experience in Bangladesh? And what do young people need to participate fully and meaningfully in policy making?
Yeah. So, I mean, thank you very much for having me here. It's such a great privilege. And I think, this is really the time where people like me shouldn't talk too much. We should listen more. We should really figure out what is it we can do best as, colleagues working in the UN system, in government system, and so on, to support young people, right? So we are trying to do that as well, of course. I think, we have done UNICEF here in Bangladesh and in the region as well. We've done a lot of evidence collection, evidence gathering, where we make sure that young people's voices are there, or perceptions and knowledge. So we have that. We know, for example, that, while around 70% of young people in Bangladesh would say that they learn about climate in school, 50% are still saying they don't understand what it is. So a lot of adolescents and young people out there still are not aware of how climate is affecting their lives, why it's like that, and also why they may have really good aspirations. Actually, more than 90% young people would say, we would like to do something, we would like to be able to act, but they don't know really how to do that, right? So it's still the very few young people that are able to, let's say, be empowered and contribute at national level policy development, at global level policy development. So I think that one thing that's needed for young people, and one thing that we need to do more of as UN, as UNICEF, is to ensure that whatever is happening at national level, with directly together with young people, or at least with their voices, as an example, that needs to be fed back down to young people at community level again, right? So we need to make sure that the young people's voice and action doesn't stay up there in the higher halls of policymakers, and then it is no longer meaningful for adolescents and young people that are living through the climate crisis every day, right? So that's one point I think that we need to be much better at. Another thing that I spoke with one of the young climate activists in Bangladesh and asked her, so what do you think that needs to be done? One thing she pointed out to me was, if you look at parliamentarians, let's say in Bangladesh, so only 6 parliamentarians out of 300 are under 40, right? So we need to help foster more political minds, to help support young people that might want to go the policy way, for them to be able to influence as well, not once in a while, but every day, right? So I think this is really, really important to us. How do we do that? That is something we need to work with young people on, and you know, it's not one agency that can do that. I think the other thing that you know, that we need to be able to do more of is, we are very good as adults to believe, we are good at believing we know what young people need, we know what young people should do, but in fact, we might not know, right? So one of the examples that I've worked with, both in Vietnam, actually, when I was based in Vietnam, and what we are starting to do in Bangladesh as well, this in 2022, is to have a youth challenge, a challenge for young people that's about climate change, but where we are really asking youth, how is climate impacting you in your everyday life? What is the problem? And then we'll give young people throughout the country resources to help both, you know, capacity development, but also a bit of finance to come up with solutions. Those solutions might become bankable as, you know, entrepreneurship solutions, or they might translate into advocacy or community action. But the whole exercise is to ask young people, what exactly is the problem that you feel, and how can we help solve it, and how can we help you come up with solutions. So through that process, I think it's not just about, of course, about engaging young people, helping them to become these change makers at local level, but also utilizing all that storytelling to influence policymakers at various levels. So what I mean by that is, one thing is engaging in policy development, but not all young people can do that, would want to do that, have the energy or the capacity to do that, but being able to do something in your own right every day at community level, that is also how we can help young people champion adaptation and climate change. So this is what I really want to work more on, together with you and colleagues, together with young people, together with GCA in Bangladesh and beyond. Thank you.
Yeah, I know. Thank you so much, Marianne, for highlighting and especially talking about the bottom-up approach, not to top to bottom. Because usually the front line, you can say the soldier or youth are somehow being neglected in this whole process. So I think it's really important that how we can connect the people from the grassroots level to be on the platform while discussing, and also bringing the success story to the broader negotiation table. So yeah, thanks. So as we running out of time, now I would like to request all of you 3 panelists to be precise regarding the 4 questions. So now the question is about, what can government do to ensure youth are included in adaptation policies and action? So I would like to ask Katie and to be precise. Yeah.
Thanks, Irfan, and also thanks to fellow panelists. I think it's really insightful to hear from your views. And from my side, my view on what can governments do to ensure that youth are included. Of course, to include youth in their work, both from a policy level and from an implementation level. From policy level, it can be through organizing youth consultations, involving youth in the delegations, as Salim mentioned, and from from an implementation level, it can be provide knowledge, capacity building, financial support to youth really working on the ground, especially in local communities and especially from indigenous communities. And of course, another challenge that Salim mentioned is because of the lack of attention, general attention on adaptation compared to mitigation, which also result in lack of attention and support to youth working in adaptation. And there is definitely an urgent need for governments to acknowledge the urgency of adaptation actions and also adaptation finance, and that adaptation and mitigation must go hand in hand, and including youth engagement. And a key demand that I've heard from many youth activists or youth policy person working in the field is for intergovernmental funds to really establish youth indicators, for example, the Adaptation Fund, GCF, GEF, and we have seen good practices. For example, the Adaptation Fund's work on exploring ways to involve youth voices in its midterm strategy consultation and also organizing youth consultations. I'm looking forward to more funds to follow that.
Thanks, Katie. So yeah, same question goes to Anish. So Anish, what do you think? What should government do to ensure more youth voices? Okay, I think so. Anish may be having some network issues. So maybe Marianne, over to you, please.
So I think that, I mean, so now I haven't been involved so much in national adaptation policies, right? But I've been involved in engaging young people in policy development before. And I think that it is so often what we end up doing is to collect evidence, you know, get young people's voice there, and then we negotiate and work with policymakers. And that is just not good enough, right? So we need to turn it around, and we really need to invite the decision makers to come to young people, for youth to really not just talk, but showcase what should be done, right? I think let's try to turn it around, not try to fit in young people's ways of doing things into how adults are doing it, but try to do it in the other way. Get a fresh, you know, point of view on how does young people really, how are they really able to help develop, not just influence, but help develop policies? Can we do that together, right? Can we actually turn it around? Not inviting young people into policy makers and all this, but invite policymakers to come and sit with young people on young people's, perspectives and on their turf in a way, right? And I think that's one way of turning it around, but it takes work, and that is something that we need the champions in the political system to help us with as well, right?
Yeah, thank
it
you
can
so
be
much.
uncomfortable, it can be insensitive, but we need to do something else than what we're doing right now, I think.
Yeah, and thank you so much, Marianne, for sharing your insight. And yeah, I saw in the chat, I think so, Katie, there's a question for you. So which mechanism do you propose to communicate and inform better the population about adaptation?
I would say GCA is perfect. On the technical perspective, we have so many amazing publications, including the Adaptation Trends Report launched last year. And also from an advocacy perspective, I think UNFCCC's youth constituency, Young Girl, is definitely a good source to have advocacy voices, and also thinking in the UNFCCC processes, which also can influence the national governments.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks everyone for coming along. Thanks Katie, thanks Marianne, and thanks Anish for sharing your amazing the insight from your amazing work we are doing. No, it's officially the first panel discussion is over. Now I would like to hand over to my amazing colleague Katie Lee for a panel discussion showcasing the amazing work young people are doing in Asia. So Katie, over to you.
And maybe before that, Katie, you just take over. Something that will be important to know is what are the challenges that youth face regarding the climate impacts in Asia? Then very fast, Irfan, what do you see? What are the impacts of climate change in Asia?
So yeah, if we talk about the impact of climate change, so recently we're having flooding in India, in Bangladesh. So I think so these are the impact of the climate change. And despite, especially for example, I'm from Pakistan, if I talk about my country, so our contribution to greenhouse gas emission is less than 1%, but we are the most affected country, and we are among the five most 10 affected country by climate change. I think so here it's really important that we talk about climate justice, that and especially youth here play an important role. They should come on the front because the future belong to youth, future belong to all of us. So that's why and we can see the impact of climate change will be severe in future. So it's time to act now.
Excellent, Kathy. One of the impacts that you see in Asia.
Well, I would say definitely it's impacted in so many ways. For example, youth working on the ground, and they're having so little support, and also they're really, even now many least developed countries, small island states, they're facing the challenges of the adaptation or loss and damage challenges, and thinking about comparing to now to 20 years from now, it's even going to be more challenging for them.
Marianne, what impact do you see in Asia?
I mean, I think there's so much potential here, but I think we will only really see impact when we also work with private sector. We need to get the business community on board, also in adaptation. And we need to, for young people, young entrepreneurs, young people out there that they're about to, choose their path. They need to be equipped also with green skills, green mindsets. The DNA needs to be green and from now on, right, in business. And I think that we need to work with young people to do that. So it's not one thing, right? But I think that if we are better at, meeting young people where they are and really listening to what needs to be done together and having more dialogues, right, at local level as well. And then figure out, how this is not just one thing, but everything we do from now on, whether we work in UNICEF, whether we work with this area or that area, this is a number top agenda, whether we are, wherever we sit in a government, climate change adaptation need to be top priority, right? So without that, young people's energy, ambition, and voice won't be able to change much right now, to be honest. So we need to still establish that enabling environment.
Fantastic. Then thank you very much. And now we will have the other panel, the panel that is about youth leading adaptation solutions. Then each one of the speakers will have 3 minutes. Then over to you, Kathy. And from there, we are going to move to working groups. You will have the possibility to very briefly also share what you are doing in your country. I can see here at the chat many ideas and initiatives that are taking place. And we will have also a conversation about the priorities that you have. Then Kathy, over to you. Please welcome all our panelists.
Thank you so much, Adriana, and thanks, Irfan, for moderating the last panel. And moving to the new panel, and we have Alice, Sidratul, and Safira and Ruba joining us to talk about what they are doing on youth-led adaptation solutions. And this is more of a showcasing section. So without further ado, I'll pass the floor to our panelists, and who will briefly introduce themselves and also share their case studies. And the guiding question is really simple. It's about sharing, what challenges you see in the field, and also any innovative youth-led solutions you're implementing in your country, and any lessons learned, any challenges, and the main priorities for you in terms of youth-led solutions to be sustainable and scalable. So without further ado, I'll pass the floor to Alice first. Alice, feel free to take the floor.
Hi, yes, thank you very much. Let me share my PowerPoint. Yes, hopefully everyone can see it. Yes, so my name is Alice, and I'm the Chief Youth Officer for the Global Alliance of Universities on Climate. Climate change poses an existential threat to humanity's survival, and the clear scientific evidence urges coordinated solutions beyond national borders. And in response to the global challenge, the world-leading universities are called to play on a critical role. The Global Alliance of Universities on Climate is the first cross-national initiative of this kind, and it is established in 2019, missioned to provide leadership of global higher education efforts addressing climate change. With shared values, 15 universities from 9 countries across 6 continents commit to advancing climate solutions. Its mission by promoting cooperation among member universities and providing leadership on joint research, talent cultivation, campus action, public engagement, and social implementation. In 2019, the Alliance's first graduate forum created a youth platform for learning, exchanging, and making their voices heard. At COP25, 15 students formed a COP25 youth delegation promoting the cooperation of young students globally. And in 2021, GOG upgraded the third graduate forum as the Global Youth Summit on Net Zero Future in order to play a more active role in mobilizing with the world's young leaders. The theme Climate X emphasized the interconnections between climate changes and other sustainable development goals in order to inspire global youth and think outside of the box and explore ways to harness synergy. The summit featured 30 events across 18 time zones, which drew over 400 submissions and over 1.25 million online participation. And this June, GOG is proud to launch the Climate X Leadership Training Program. Through a combination of training, speaker series, and group exercise between Sciences Po, Imperial College, University of Tokyo, Stellenbosch Universities, Oxford University, and LSE, London School of Political Science and Economics, this program will focus on helping our ambassadors better understand the importance of climate governance agenda and the synergy between climate change and our topics of adaptation and resilience, nature, biodiversity and food, secure and sustainable energy, and finance. Leading our ambassadors to investigate innovative strategies for a net zero future. As part of GOG's Climate X Global campaign, all ambassadors will get opportunities to contribute their own high-level events to the Global Youth Summit on Net Zero Future from October 30th to November 4th, and also making our summit by youth for youth. In addition, we will select students from the program to attend COP27 in person in Egypt as the youth delegation. And applications for the leadership program is still open, so do not miss this unique opportunity to become one of GOG's youth ambassador to represent our community. And please stay tuned from our website, gog.net, for more information regarding the program and the summit. And thank you, everyone.
Great, thank you so much, Alice. I'll pass the floor next to Sidratul. Feel free to take the floor, and the same questions is over to you about what are the interesting solutions you're leading and what are the challenges that you're seeing.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Hello, everyone. I'm Sidratul Mutaha from Bangladesh. So I'm leading a global project called Mangrove Conservation with Artificial Intelligence in Bangladesh. So in this project, we will detect the species of our mangrove forest and also will train an artificial intelligence model using on-ground data and satellite image data to identify areas of our mangrove forest where restoration is possible. Also, we'll create end-to-end project-based tutorials for the students who aspire to learn artificial intelligence. It will be a replicable project, so students or young professionals from other countries can replicate this project in their countries as well. So we'll shoot our whole journey and create awareness videos about climate change as well. So we have one local partner, university partner, Ahsanullah University of Science and Technology. So 9 students from that university are working with me in this project. Also, we have 2 global partners for the project, Technovation and NVIDIA. So from my experiences so far, what I have seen that the most problem I faced during the data collection, because we need a lot of data, like a lot of high resolution images, like we didn't have access to satellite images. And in Google, we have satellite images from 2019, which is pretty old. So, but we have overcome this challenge as we have a new partner, United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs. So they have agreed to provide us satellite images.
Thank you so much. And next over to Safira. Feel free to take the.
Okay, can you hear me now? Is it clear? Okay, thank you so much for the opportunity, and I will share to you the real implementation and adaptation in climate. As a global youth organization in agriculture, ERS, we are responsible for contributing to our society, especially in achieving global goals development or SDGs 2030, right? And it led us to develop a social project named Village Concept Project, as you guys can see in here, and or VCP that is implemented in rural areas, because Indonesia has lots of villages inside. So it is important to develop and improve their livelihoods through 3 core values that we hold firmly. There are environment, education, and community development. From 2019 to 2020, I was work on site with my VCP in the local community East Java in Indonesia. There was less awareness about waste management, especially in plastic pollution. They burn their plastic waste on their land, and it is pity for us, especially for me and my team, to see that they are just polluting their fresh air and damaging their environment without realizing it. This makes us feel what is called eco-anxiety. If you ever heard about the eco-anxiety. Through the first pillar in VCP environment, we do some workshop with villagers, especially for women in agriculture, to raise their awareness and especially about the importance of taking care of their environment. We turns out make an educational workshop and training related to those problems through real actions, such as a eco-brick workshop that aims to increase the awareness of plastic pollution, as you guys can see on here, and without burning their waste. Moreover, yes, also have an agriculture organization also had a scientific project program called Youth Agriculture, which aims to increase the youth awareness of agriculture and, of course, climate change. VCP at University of Brawijaya created a workshop on organic fertilizer. By turning their organic waste into fertilizer, we see a potential improvement in sustainability for the village that we have been taking care of, and we also help them to improve livelihood by promoting their local products. This is our local products. So for now, we have more than 10 local products ranging from snacks, tea bag, coffee, and beauty products. As you know that, well, WWF recommendation in COP26 last year is one of them is local products, right? And besides that, my other friends in university and I also encourage people in VCP to utilize their natural resources to make natural print textile through eco-print training with the women community in those villages. So in conclusion, by connecting the SDGs and the local community, as Salim said, we can partner and accelerate the sustainable development goals in 2030, and it also can be as youth recommendation, I guess. And so to make the youth initiative sustainable and scalable, my team and YesWorld craft a new framework of design thinking for every project so that it can be impactful and right on target, because we know that sometimes project is not on target. This framework also designed by conducting the bootcamp or training called VCP Bootcamp. And in the future, I will develop more social project on SDGs issue to achieve the goals through my other platforms called SDGs Marathon, that I established in 2021, and it almost 1 year. I hope that there will be lots of youth actions in the future. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thanks, and last but not least, Ruba, over to you.
Yeah, so thank you very much for providing me this stage. I'm glad to be part of this amazing discussion and this assembly. Perhaps I should start with how I came to be here in the first place. Since I think I was a kid, I hungered for information and knowledge, and that's how I heard about this term called climate change. When I was 13 years old, in 2019, I realized that it wasn't just a term, but a crisis, or more specifically, a planetary crisis. In March 2021, when I was 14 years old, I launched a petition which called on our Honorable Prime Minister to implement the Bangladesh Planetary Emergency Declaration passed by the Bangladesh Parliament on 13 November 2019. That petition also demanded for quality, detailed climate education in our school curriculum. In addition to garnering some 2,000 signatures despite the COVID-19 pandemic, it was also endorsed by 30 notable individuals from our country in the climate change arena, including Professor Salimul Haq, who I'm really honored to speak alongside today. And I would like to give you the good news today that while designing the new education curriculum, the ministry has decided to have an individual subject named climate and environment in the school curriculum. Now, coming to the point of adaptation, Shatkhira, a coastal district near Sundarban in Bangladesh, is a role model for youth-led adaptation. In Shatkhira, youth are creating awareness about climate-induced disasters and management. They're helping people to move to cyclone shelters, local governments. My colleague, Shaheen Billah, who led this adaptation process, said to me that we are tired of continuously struggling and adapting with natural disasters. Although we are surviving through an adaptation techniques, the challenges for our way ahead are increasing day by day. So they have and are facing several obstacles. The adaptation process they're leading is based on what they're seeing as part of the vulnerable and marginalized community. Sometimes due to lack of capacity and science-oriented strategies, their processes don't turn up sustainable. That's why we youth and children need much more deep knowledge and skills to lead the adaptation process sustainably and smoothly. We require more capacity and skill building education in all communities, not just the capacity development issues the youth are also facing financial issues. And now I'm almost at the end of my speech. So I would like to take up the point of loss and damage here. Loss and damage is spoken aloud and discussed. Should be spoken aloud and discussed, but as till now, it has been mostly something like whisper about, as far as we could hear. Without ensuring that loss and damage are seriously addressed, climate justice is utterly impossible. Some may contend by speaking about loss and damage, we vulnerable countries ask for too much, but consider just this month's delayed floods here in Bangladesh caused by extremely heavy rains. It cost more some $2.4 million of financial loss. That was just an example. Yet, do they count for the loss and damage from people's psychological and emotional breakdowns, or the post-floods, vector-borne disease outbreaks, or the health causes? So we are, and also the youth and children are enduring, who live and endure those climate-induced disasters, suffer from traumatic childhood. So asking for loss and damage for just direct financial impact is far too little. We haven't yet asked for the real actual loss and damage, and you say that we are asking for too much. So in conclusion, I'd like to reiterate some of our demands: increasing opportunity for youth and children to build their capacity and skills to make youth-led adaptation more sustainable, and also including more of vulnerable and marginalized youth like Shaheen in the decision-making process is steps of ensuring climate justice via loss and damage at UN United Nations COP27 meeting in Egypt. Thank you very much for this stage.
Thank you so much, everyone. And to wrap up this session, I think it would be awesome to hear from Carolyn, one of our Youth Adapt winner, which is a joint initiative by GCA Climate Investment Fund and also the AFDB.
Hello, my name is Caroline Mokuhe. I'm the founder and CEO of Kim Planter Seedlings Nurseries Limited. Over the years, climate change has led to droughts. Harsh weather conditions cannot allow crops to grow. We at Kim Planter Seedlings, we are helping dozens of farmers to adopt this sad and harsh reality by propagating for them drought-resistant seedlings to promote Sustainable Development Goals 1, 2, 3, 8, and 12 by ending poverty, ending hunger, improving health, economic growth, and responsible consumption.
Kim Planter Nurseries and Seedlings is based in Kenya. The company is working with smallholder farmers in East Africa, and it targets to reach 2 million farmers with drought-resistant seedlings to enable them survive by having food security and livelihoods. Their drought-resistant seedlings are keenly researched and selected varieties that can adapt to dry, hot conditions and low soil moisture content. The company sells vegetable and fruit seedlings, tree seedlings, and also offers agronomic training on crop management to farmers.
Awesome, great. Then with that, we'll be moving to the next section, which is working groups. It's titled Designing a Climate Resilient Asia Post-2030. And the aim of this session is really to be an interactive, consultative part. So we would welcome everyone to turn on your cameras and also to share your views before Ife kindly opens the working group breakout sessions. And yeah, so with that, Ife, would you mind putting us into the breakout sessions? And,
yes, and before, then we will have 4 working groups. One of them is facilitated by Sohal Bin, who is from ICAT, or the second group will be Sakib Haq, that is also from ICAT, Irfan from the Youth Advisory Panel, and Kati. Then in this room, Kati will remain. You will have 10 minutes for the discussion. And try also, I know that the time is very short, but try to, very brief at least, to introduce yourself. I have seen in the chat that you are mentioning from where you are from and the projects that you are implementing, but then you have the possibility there. And basically the questions there will be two. How a climate resilient Asia will be? How do you imagine post 2030? You know that in 2030, we will have the Sustainable Development Goals achieved. How do you imagine? And the key also, what actions are needed to promote this transformational change? Now, then, Ife, over to you to divide the groups and to give the other instructions.
Right, so the breakout rooms will be open now, and I'll put a link in the chat where you can add your thoughts on a sticky note if you're unable to speak. And but we'd also love to hear from you orally. So feel free to turn on your camera, take yourself off mute, and share your ideas on these questions.
And each one of the group will need to report back to the plenary.
Great, I think we'll probably have a quorum in a few seconds. And Adriana or if you're free to let me know when the room is scheduled.
Yeah, we are checking here for the groups. I think some people have been already moved to the groups.
Yes, your breakout room is this main room.
Okay.
Great, shall we get started?
Yeah, please.
Great, and everyone, I think you can follow the link in the chat that Ife dropped to go to the Jamboard. And this session is really, as mentioned, as a consultative session to hear your views on adaptation. And also, again, would welcome if any of you would like to turn on your camera. And the questions that we aim to address in this session is what are your priorities and what priorities do you think should be considered for the global goal on adaptation of the UNFCCC, and what does a climate resilient Asia post 2030 look like to you instead of, you've heard many examples from our panelists, and also what are the five actions that can actually enable transformational change in Asia. So without further ado, we actually have a really amazing opening speaker, Amzad, and over to you to kickstart the session. Thanks.
Am I audible, right?
Yes, please go
Yes,
ahead.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. This is Amjad Hussain. I'm working with the Hunger Project Bangladesh and looking after youth mobilization unit. And I had a wonderful journey with Delta Plan 2100 with Youth Action Track. And I'm very happy to hear. So what actually have to do would you repeat? I mean, what are the youth priorities of global goal on adaptation, and what does climate resilient Asia past 2030 look like, right?
Yeah, that is correct.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Actually, these are very good things that our community leaders and youth are want to involve with climate change and adaptation issues, especially, and youth-led and youth climate action will be more relevant and sustainable and effective when the full spectrum of young people are included. There is a need to mainstream unheard. That means we couldn't hear the community youth leaders' voice. So no climate action without the inclusive of all young groups. Actually, so young people with disabilities, refugees, ethnic minorities, and others, policy and climate action landscape needed, and also we remove systematic barrier around meaningful youth engagement in climate action, as a create more inclusive safe space to encourage climate action. Many of respondents, many of young people in our country said that they were hesitant to speak out on climate issue because they were afraid of influential interest group. This could be because of cultural dynamics around respect and uh, um, uh, dynamic around respect, actually. And I think there is a need to ensure the effectiveness and sustainability of youth climate action initiative that requires cross-cultural sector support. Development partners and NGOs suggest that the COVID-19 pandemic illustrated how collective efforts on government and development partners. Also, youth need internet access and develop platforms, common platforms, so where you can initiate any kinds of action, especially for adaptation. Actually, our young people know only they are doing only plantation. They are only raising awareness for deforestation, but they haven't any knowledge about adaptation. So building knowledge and treating awareness among young people as well as all people is very important, I think. This is from my side.
Thank you so much. And to everyone else, feel free to raise your hand if you have any thoughts that you would like to share. And on that link on the fourth slide, you can see the Jamboard, which is the Jamboard we're using for this section. So feel free to add any stickers to the point, to the slide. And maybe I'll give 1 or 2 minutes for people to write their thoughts down. Thanks. And in the meantime, feel free to raise your hand if you have any thoughts to share. I can see there are already a few stickers on the slide, which is great news. Sure, Mohammed, go ahead.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking the opportunity.
Mohammed, I think we can't hear you very well. Would you mind trying another, maybe another speaker, or yeah, reconnecting?
Am I audible clearly?
Yeah, now we can hear you.
I'm Mohammed Ramzan Ali from CCTV, Christian Commissions for Development in Bangladesh. We basically working in the coastal region of Bangladesh under the project Promoting Climate Change Resilience Community for Bangladesh. Now we are working or doing a research on how the effectiveness or how the people take the different adaptation approaches and how they think or how they actually or what are the factors behind their acceptance any adaptation measures. And we basically categorize 5 types of adaptations, and we are searching for the effectiveness of this adaptation and what are the factors behind the accepting or rejecting the adaptation. We think some good information will be come from these factors where need actually the advocacy, where need actually the capacity building, or where actually need the policies that actually promote these adaptation measures. And youth community from the question who actually think about the climate change adaptations, and as well as the youth from these coastal regions or the vulnerable regions, actually, and collaboration between them, I think a good output or more climate resilience community will be built up. Thank you.
Many thanks. And I see quite a few post notes on the Jamboard, which is really great news. And anyone else that would like to share anything on your thoughts on these three questions? And I see on the Jamboard, there are posters like finance, multiple ones on finance, and also attention on locally led adaptation, on intergovernmental collaboration, on consultation, on youth involvement in policymaking, which I think is really interesting. And also, I guess probably my favorite one is adaptation being included in schools curriculum. And another finance one and support from developed countries for the North-South cooperation, which I think is definitely key. And I think UNFCCC and many parties of UNFCCC are actively exploring. And last but not the least, attention from all the players, including governments, private sector, civil society organizations. So I guess I can give another minute for people to write down their thoughts before we regroup again. And in the meantime, I was wondering if Ife would like to share anything about her views on any of these questions. Actually, I don't think Ife is in the room. Maybe Adriana, over to you. Do you have any amazing ideas on this, either from your experience at GCA or from your experience back in UNFCCC on the work from the adaptation division on these topics?
Excellent. Kathy, I agree with many of the recommendations. Youth participation in decision-making process, adaptation included in school curriculum, funding, intergenerational dialogue. And I think now we will need to return back to the main room. Then thank you very much to every one of you. Just to mention that we want to be connected with you and to keep you informed about all the activities. But now it's time to return back to the main room and to report about this conversation. Then if we will we'll invite all the other groups to come because we are in the main room. Please stay in the room, and we are also going to hear what are the other groups discussing and what are the ideas and recommendations.
Sounds perfect. And just while the other people return to the main group, feel free to write anything down. And I think it's been very interesting discussion indeed. And hi, Ife. I was trying to call on you when we were in the breakout group to hear your views, but I'm sure there are opportunities for you to share as well. And I think people are still rejoining the main group.
Well, everybody. Now we are in the plenary again. I hope that you have interesting discussions and conversations. Then now I will hand over to each one of you to report back. Then in the case of Kif, will you report back about the discussion in your group?
Was that to me, sorry, Adriana?
Yes.
Yeah, sure. So unfortunately, we got cut short. I think we were getting right into a very good discussion about education and the use of expertise in grassroots education as well. But we do have a couple of post-it notes, and it really started off with a sort of post-it that got everybody thinking about how to engage the youth more meaningfully. And that's with proper guidance. So as I mentioned there, also our youth speaker earlier on mentioned about how important it is to have climate adaptation and climate science lessons in the educational system. But then also making sure that, you know, the people that are teaching it at this point in time, they're also engaging and picking up the latest up-to-date science that's coming up, the knowledge that's coming. And how do we really connect all these different places that all this lessons and learnings that are coming from, and adaptation being very context specific. That's something that we need to be looking at, how we're linking all of these lessons and learnings, making sure people are really picking up the ideas that are being shared, and in particular getting the voices from the youth as they're learning a lot more of these things, becoming a lot more creative. How do we then foster that knowledge and enhancement going forward. And again, proper guidance and funding is something that needs to be put into it. We had a couple of points in terms of how to make youth a little bit more inclusive. Also, something that came up in our panel discussion earlier was about how we make sure that the youth are given an actual space in these forums and these different negotiating policy making spaces, not just as being a sort of token and as a representative that comes in, but making sure that the policymakers are actually engaging with the youth. And how do we bridge that together? And one of our colleagues mentioned something about being intergenerational, learning from the communities themselves. They've often been the ones that have been dealing with these things right on the grassroots, on the front lines themselves. And they do have a lot of adaptation lessons and learnings that they've come up with, making sure that those lessons are also passed on towards the youth in terms of being able to foster more innovative ideas. So I'm really sorry to our group if I haven't been able to cover all the points. As I mentioned, our Jam boards are open, so please do feel free to keep adding sticky notes throughout the conversation. And if I've missed anything, please feel free to write them in the chat or raise your hand. Thank you, Adriana. Back to you.
Thank you very much. And I think this point is crucial. It's about education, skills development, not only including this as part of the curriculum, but also training teachers to be able to deliver this adaptation learning. Then now, Swahil, over to you.
Hi, yes. So again, we had the similar issue of not being, we couldn't allocate much time on to each question, as this is a very broad and as was a very interesting topic for everyone. So we were having to rush through the end for the final transformational changes as well as the 5 actions that we talked about. But the few recurring themes that we could find through our session was that we all agreed that there was a need for better capacity building for youth, and as well as one thing that is mostly stressed upon is there needs to be better knowledge transfer between the global south and global north when it comes to climate work and as well as climate advocacies. And one thing that we also spoke really hard on is there needs to be a method or as well as there needs to be policing when it comes to climate financing, especially when the funds are needed to reach the ground or the grassroots of any area. And one interesting topic that we were able to talk about is how dietary aspects of the current scenario and as well as current generation is not really well sustainable in the current paradigm. So youth needs to play a core role into understanding how we can move away from the quote unquote general diet that we have and as well as have a more sustainable understanding of it. I feel that this is something that we rarely or seldom talk about when we talk about climate work, but there was also a need for better transparency in terms of media coverage for climate work and as well as better coverage for renewable energy. So all of this was a really interesting take on it. With that, I conclude and back to you, Adriana.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And now, Irfan, please, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Adriana. So in our breakout room, so we also having also same point as already been mentioned in other breakout room in here. So I would mention some of them. The first was like the funding resources to the locally led adaptation, but in majority of the cases, I think there's not enough resources for the people who are on the forefront of a fight against climate change. Yeah, especially if you talk about Asia, so in majority of the countries, still the climate adaptation is not on the top of the agenda, and also youth involvement is also not in the top of the agenda in many countries in Asia. So it's really important to also have youth involvement, because in majority of the country, their population is a big breaker of population is youth population. So their voices really matters to have in this whole climate adaptation agenda. And also the governance structure and the bureaucracy. So many countries, it's also somehow difficult for the young people to bring something forward, because they need to go through a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of bureaucratic processes. So it's also really important to consider. And also important thing is the knowledge transfer, not the knowledge transfer between and within communities in the countries and provinces, but also knowledge transfer between global north and south, bringing young people together, learning from each other and sharing their success story. And also the most important, the youth capacity, youth awareness, to build their capacity, to sensitize them, to develop them, and to give them the skills on which on one hand that they can fight against climate change, but in other hand, they can also be a source of green jobs, for example, providing them with a technique that can tackle both issues, like unemployment issues and also the climate crisis issues. Yeah, thanks, and back to you, Adriana.
Thanks a lot, Irfan. Then Kathy, over to you.
Thanks, everyone. And I guess a few keywords from my session, because there was quite some interesting posters on the GEM board. Of course, there are quite a few, like other folks have mentioned: finance, consultation, locally led adaptation, intergovernmental collaboration, intergenerational dialogue that Adriana mentioned, and also that youth being involved in policy making, adaptation being included in schools curriculum, which is definitely my favorite, and support from developed countries, North-South cooperation, attention from all the players, whether governments, private sector, civil society organizations. So I think those are super interesting points. Back to you, Adriana.
Thank you very much. I think it has been a very interesting discussion with many ideas and recommendations. And the Global Center on Adaptation is organizing these Youth Adaptation Forums. It is the third one. The first one was in Africa. The second was in for the Pacific. Now it is the Youth Forum for Asia. We will continue in June with the forum for Europe, July, North America, and August will be the Latin America. And here, what I have heard is also that you are suggesting to have a sub-goal for the global goal on adaptation to really track how governments are engaging and promoting youth participation, not only in policy, but as well adaptation action. Then it is a very important point, and I think from the Asian Youth Forum, you are bringing this to the international community, and we will be sharing also this at the upcoming events. To share with you also, we will have not only the Youth Adaptation Forums, there will be a Youth Adaptation Summit. Very soon, we will open the call for applications, and we will have also the call for the Youth Advisory Panel 2023. If you want to be engaged and you want to provide advice to the Global Center on Adaptation, to our CEO, please apply. Keep a Turnet, follow the GCA social media channels. And with that, I want to also invite a video message from the COP27 representative from Egypt. Then let's watch his message.
Distinguished participants, colleagues, friends, and inspiring young people. I'm pleased to speak to you today on behalf of Egypt's incoming presidency of COP27, taking place next November in the city of Sharm el-Sheikh. Let me at the outset thank and congratulate Global Center on Adaptation. We were thrilled to learn that GCA is putting together a series of youth-focused adaptation dialogues. We are further thrilled that these dialogues is starting from Africa and is being held on the sidelines of the World Water Forum taking place at Dakar, Senegal. Distinguished participants, I'm talking to you after a few weeks from the release of the 6th Assessment IPCC Working Group 2 report on impacts, adaptation, and vulnerabilities. The message is very clear, and there is an endless list of reasons about why do we need to feel alarmed and deeply concerned. Adverse impacts of climate change are already here and cumulatively increasing in all regions and across all sectors. Africa is among the most affected, including in vital areas such as access to water. Some progress is made on adaptation, but it is furthest from enough. Time is running out, resources mobilized are dismal, and adaptation limits are fast approaching. The bigger picture would be more visible with Working Group 3 in April, and many other important engagements such as the UN Oceans Conference in Lisbon. Sharm el-Sheikh is expected to be the cup of implementation. Adaptation should be at the heart of implementation discourse and action. The 2 years Glasgow Sharm el-Sheikh work program on global goal and adaptation was launched and will go through a series of policy and technical discussions. Many voices are calling for seeing a qualitative accomplishment on the GGA discussion in Sharm el-Sheikh before the conclusion of its process in UAE in 2023. We look forward for your valuable engagements, inputs, and submissions on the road towards a GGA that captures your concerns, priorities, and challenges, and showcase the best practices of youth-led global and local resilience solutions. Meanwhile, it is imperative to continue to demand a sufficient, meaningful, accessible, predictable, and balanced climate finance for adaptation. The 50-50 mitigation adaptation climate finance must not be a theoretical construct, and doubling the double should be honored and sustained. As COP27 presidency, we commit ourselves to a science-based, balanced, transparent, and inclusive leadership that promotes equitable progress on all fronts and encourages a drive for additional ambition and strengthened resilience. In addition, the momentum created in Glasgow needs to be maintained and geared towards implementation. Our objectives and vision will greatly benefit from the inputs from and engagement with all stakeholders. And as a country with extended commitment to youth empowerment, and as an annual host of the World Youth Forum in the same city of Sharm el-Sheikh, we will strive to ensure that youth are at the heart of the conversation, as key contributors to policy planning and implementation, as well as being most affected by the future impact of the decisions we make today. For these reasons, we are very glad that COP26 mandated an annual youth-led forum starting from Sharm el-Sheikh in cooperation with YOUNGO and UFCCC Secretariat. Egypt aspires that this forum and the COP itself provide a conducive environment for you to network, disseminate, impart and receive knowledge, speak up and exert the right level of pressure on governments and all stakeholders. I say this while looking forward to recurrent and dynamic conversations with you before, during, and after Sharm el-Sheikh. I thank you.
Thank you very much for this video message from the COP27 presidency, and all these ideas and recommendations will be presented to decision makers at COP27 in Egypt. Then thank you very much to all of you. Thank you for your experience, for your good practices, for your ideas and recommendations. What you are doing really matters, and we need you. Climate change is a global crisis, but also we have the possibility to build a climate resilient world. You are the champions, we need you, and we count on you to mobilize this adaptation agenda forward. Then thank you very much. I want to invite you, all of you, to turn on your cameras and to take a family photo. We have the Youth Adaptation Network, that is a global platform that connects young people from over 130 countries. If you would like to be part of the Youth Adaptation Network, we will put on the chat the link to be part, and then you will be able to receive information about our upcoming activities, but also what can you do to implement initiative in your community. Then we have everyone, I invite you everyone to turn on your camera like this. Our family photo will be very nice. Sakib, I think that you have, I can see you have not turned on your camera yet. Sonia, Purima, Hashi, Rasha, Alice. Then it's good to see you all here. Different countries from one corner to the other, part of this, this Asian Youth Adaptation Forum. Also is an invitation that you share in your social media channel using the hashtag Youth Adaptation Forums to promote and to spread the message. Then I would request my colleague Celine to take a screenshot, not only with the speakers, but now also with all the participants. Then a big smile from all of you.
On the count of 3, 1, 2, 3, smile.
And then now one with the hands, everyone.
1, 2, 3. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we have concluded the Youth Adaptation Forum for Asia. Thank you to all of you. Have an excellent day and evening.
Great.
Thanks
Thanks everyone so
for
much.
joining. Yeah, thank you.
Bye.